Stay tuned to the end of this video so you can help an autistic person in need. Alfred Hitchcock, one of the most influential filmmakers of the 20th century, or of all time really, is remembered not just for the films he created, such as Psycho, Vertigo, or The Birds, but is also largely considered to be the master of tension, thriller, and horror. While being such an influential filmmaker for the silver screen, Hitchcock was notoriously a difficult director to work with, especially for his female leads. During the making of The Birds, actress Tippi Hedren was directed to react as live birds were thrown at her by animal handlers off camera. This scene was initially only supposed to be done in a few takes, but in reality, it took 5 days. And on the final day, Tippi Hedren was physically attacked by one of the birds on her left eye, leaving a deep cut on her lid. The Birds, along with Psycho before it, changed the landscape of what we understand of horror and thriller in cinema to this day. And when asked about his pathos on creating such impactful, scary movies, Hitchcock was quoted saying,
"I always believe in the following advice from the playwright Victor and Sardou. He said, torture the women. The trouble today is that we don't torture the women enough. Fucking hell."
So, the other day I was talking to the father of a friend of mine, a conservative, and the subject turned to the movie Alien. He mentioned to me that he had seen the movie when it first went into theaters in 1979, and it changed the way he viewed the world. And I responded, "So you're a feminist then? And you believe in reproductive rights and bodily autonomy?" And he just stared at me blankly as if he didn't understand what I was asking or why. And that's when I realized, like many men I've spoken to about this franchise, he loves Alien, but he has genuinely no idea what the f it's about.
For today's video, our drink of choice was the Alien Secretion from homebarmenu.com. This drink consisted of 1 ounce Malibu coconut rum, 1 ounce pineapple juice, and 1 ounce Midori, all double. Garnish with a cherry and a lime slice. This drink was chosen because of its name and green look.
I am really tasting that coconut here. It's a bad day to be somebody who doesn't like coconut. Having spent a lot of time in male spaces, working as a scare actor in Halloween Horror Nights, working in the film industry with film bros,
The darkness is a metaphor for darkness.
and being a massive nerd in general, I have experience in talking with the menfolk. And let me just say, the story that I was telling in the beginning, not only is it true, but it's not an uncommon read of Alien. I have spent so many of my formative years around men who will on the one hand say some of the most vile things about women, but then on the other hand say that they're not actually a misogynist because the Alien franchise is their favorite series of all time. You know, except Prometheus. But I'll give them that one. That movie is bad. And long. And bad. Just move sideways! Just move sideways! But the common thread that I've noticed with these men is they understand that Alien is a feminist franchise, but they don't understand why Alien is a feminist franchise. Some people seem to think that Ripley just being a woman makes it the peak of feminism. She's the hashtag girl boss who can hashtag do it all, fight aliens, shoot a gun, and also be a great mom.
Get away from her, you bitch!
But I would argue, and even my fellow feminists may disagree with me on this, Alien is actually not feminist because Ripley is a woman. It's actually feminist in spite of it. And with that, I imagine you're all angrily typing in my comments. And to that, I have to say, cry, my pretties, cry, cry! Okay, but in all seriousness, let's examine the feminist legacy that is the Alien franchise. Ellen Ripley, despite being hailed as a feminist icon, was never actually intended to be a woman. There's a now famous note at the beginning of Dan O'Bannon's screenplay for the film, which was originally titled Star Beast, and that note read, "The crew is unisex, and all parts are interchangeable for men or women." This is why none of the crew were referred to by first names: Dallas, Kane, Ash, etc. These are all last names to keep the possibility of a gender-neutral casting. And while that does make it sound like Ellen Ripley was always a possibility, the part was always intended to be a man, Martin Roby, who was described as cautious but intelligent, a survivor. But when 20th Century Fox bought the rights to the screenplay, the studio head Alan Ladd Jr. was like, "Hey, let's be feminists. Let's make our lead character a girl for all women to look up to. And we'll have equal rights for everyone. 'Cause women are the future, you know?" Nah, I'm just kidding. The choice to change Ripley to a woman wasn't really something intended to make some sort of feminist statement, but rather it was intended to set the film apart from other science fiction films that were coming out at the time. Movies like David Cronenberg's The Brood and Disney's The Black Hole. And while the former was a financial success, it's definitely been outshined by Alien as the years have gone on, so I definitely think that the switch was the right choice. But of course, Alien is not just a science fiction, it's a science fiction horror film. And with Ripley being the last one alive, that makes her our final girl.
What is a survivor girl?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's an industry term.
So if you follow me on TikTok or Instagram, or you're in my personal friend group, or happen to walk by me down the street, you know I've been shouting about the final girl a lot. Well, that's because I'm kind of obsessed.
Stop it. Get some help.
The final girl is a coined term. I have had too many. This is my first. No, it's not. I had an appletini earlier. I can't say it was my first one. I'm drunk. The final girl is a term coined by Carol Clover in her book Men, Women, and Chainsaws: Gender in the Modern Horror Film. The final girl is, of course, the last one alive within a horror or slasher film. She's usually sexually unavoidable for some reason or another, usually because she is a virtuous or a good girl.
What is it about this girl?
Well, she's a virgin.
And while I don't think that Ripley is entirely sexually unavailable, given there is a scene in which Ripley and Dallas hook up that was in the original screenplay, however, since it was removed and never filmed, Ripley could definitely fall under that section of the trope. The final girl survives because she is resourceful, intelligent, and is usually the first one to know and understand that something is wrong. When Kane becomes the victim of the facehugger, Ripley, who is acting captain at the time, defies Dallas's orders due to a quarantine protocol.
Ripley, this is an order. Open that hatch right now. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Ripley, this is an order. You hear me?
Yes, I read you. The answer is negative.
Had Dallas listened and Ash not intervened to undermine her authority, the film might have ended quite differently, with a lot less people dying. The final girl also has a unisex or tomboyish name, such as Lori, Sydney, or in this case, Ripley. The final girl is also the one who squares off with the killer and eventually defeats it. Again, Ripley. So, while most people agree that Ripley is indeed a final girl, they also believe that she's still somehow a subversion of the trope and the face of womanhood, as argued by film historians Christine Cornea in her 2007 book Science Fiction Cinema Between Fantasy and Reality, and also Eleanor Johnson in her 2025 book Scream With Me: Horror Films and the Rise of American Feminism. The reasons for the contention of this label is largely because while the final girl is always a woman, she also acts as a stand-in for the male audience members. Male audience members, on average, are less averse to seeing violence done against the female body, which is why women in horror are far more likely to be the victims. Yay! It's so fun to be a woman. They're easier for male audience members to empathize with because we know violence happens to women's bodies every day, going back to that whole torture women thing that Alfred Hitchcock said. If I have to hear about one more abusive genius filmmaker. And because the violence is not done to Ripley's body, and also the omitted sex scene is not in the movie, there is therefore zero emphasis on her sexuality or the violence done to her body, thus making her transcend the trope. But, that scene is still there in the original script, so the sexualization is still kind of there. And here's the other thing. Ripley being a final girl doesn't make her character any less badass. And I don't think that anyone who thinks Ripley transcends the final girl trope is lacking in media literacy. This is a... I dropped my garnish! This is a sad day. This is a hotly debated topic amongst people who are far more smarter than me. I am indeed a bimbo, if we all recall. Although Socrates did once say that the wisest man is the man who understands, that he understands nothing. So maybe by calling myself a bimbo, I am indeed the wisest man. But if Ripley was your feminist awakening after watching her get into a giant robot suit and beat an alien out of an airlock, me too. It's okay. In some ways, I would argue that the final girl trope can be read as feminist, even if it is still initially a sexist trope. But even with that, Alien still isn't feminist because Ripley defies gender norms. Alien is feminist because the aliens do. Oh, is this a different drink? Yeah, that's because turns out I lost all the footage of the second half of this video, and I didn't like the first drink. So back to the appletini, because why mess with a classic? And it is also green and alien-y, so I think it still counts. One of the biggest ways that Alien is undeniably subversive is not through who winds up the hero in the end. It's actually through who doesn't.
You found this thing there. No blood. No Dallas.
You see, another common aspect of horror and slasher films, which Alien undeniably borrows elements from, the most common victims of the killer are women. Again, going back to that whole Alfred Hitchcock of it all. Ah! I spilled my teeny. I did it again. This doesn't mean that men are never the victims of the killers. I mean, there are enough male victims to prove that men die in these movies too, okay? But what is common in these movies is that the male victims tend to be killed off quickly or dying heroically, whereas women victims, on the other hand, tend to have far more violent deaths while cowering in fear when it happens. It's also something to note that the weapons of the killers tend to be phallic in nature. You know, shaped like the peen.
The peen what I saw. Bonjour le peen.
Stabbing weapons like knives or other particularly peen-shaped weapons that saw you in half like a chainsaw. With the way the victims are handled by the endurance of the violence and types of violence that is done, there is undeniably a gender-based subtext here, whether by conscious choice or unconscious one. Alien, on the other hand, has a different approach to its horror. The terrible place, a term used to refer to the area in which the killer or slasher of a horror is hiding. The one in Alien has a certain shape. It's a vagina, guys. They go into a vagine and they find an egg. And when the egg opens...
Behold my glory! I did it! I found the clitoris!
He is then attacked by a vagina. Okay, listen. All right, here, all the jokes about alien genitals aside, I actually don't want to joke about what happens to Kane here. Because, objectively speaking, Kane is having a reproductive organ forcefully shoved into his body, which then impregnates him against his will. Kane is a man experiencing sexual violence done to his body. While sexual violence can and does happen to men every single day at a much higher rate than is typically reported, sexual violence against men in film is very rarely shown. And when it is, it's usually minimized or passed off as a joke. The last season of The Boys, Huey was sexually assaulted not once but twice on film, and it's implied to have happened many more times off camera, all of which are passed off as jokes.
Everybody always has the same holes over and over again. It gets so fucking boring. Sometimes you just gotta make your own. And then fuck them.
Or compared to cheating.
Fucking God, I was gone for 10 days.
She almost always initiated, and again, I cannot overstate this enough. I thought it was you.
Yeah.
Absolutely disgusting. Alien, on the other hand, in my opinion, highlights the violence of sexual assault and doesn't minimize Kane's experience in any way. It's terrifying, ass-clenching tension from the moment that facehugger pops up on screen. The sexual violence is further explored by the fact that once the xenomorph has grown, we once again find ourselves with some very familiar shapes. Look, it's no secret that the xenomorph is shaped like a peen, and it also was entirely intentional. Not only was the designer of the aliens preying on audience members' sexual fears, but so was the screenwriter Dan O'Bannon, who was quoted saying that the facehugger was designed to make men in the audience cross their legs. For a horror film, sexual violence done against the male body creates an alienation, no pun intended, in its male audience. I've heard a lot of Gen X men and baby boomers say that when they saw Alien in theaters, it was the most terrifying film they'd ever seen, even more so than a film like The Exorcist, which had come out only 5 years prior. And there's a big difference between The Exorcist and Alien, aside from, the possession. The difference is that most of the violence in The Exorcist is done against a woman and a little girl, giving the men a certain degree of separation. Whereas in Alien, the bodies being victimized are men, leaving them to wonder exactly how it feels to be in that position. The subverting of typical gender roles doesn't just stop in the first Alien either, as in the sequel Aliens and Alien 3, the vast majority of violence on screen is done again to male bodies. Alien 3 takes place with Ripley residing in an all-male prison, and while she does not survive as the final girl of this film, that's not as a result to on-screen violence done to her body, but rather as self-sacrifice. In Aliens, Alien 2 in particular, directed by James Cameron, who in my opinion is the master of sequel films, this film subverts gender roles and gender expectations through its exploration of the Marine Corps in their own battle against the xenomorph. This film premiered only 2 years after the Equal Rights Amendment tragically failed to be ratified into the Constitution, which would have guaranteed that rights in the United States could not be denied or abridged by any state on account of sex. In the context of the military, this was important because at the time, women were restricted from combat positions, meaning there was a limit to the promotions and ranks and therefore pay that could be granted for women that didn't exist for their male counterparts. Don't you just love it here? Sexism in the military is still an issue to this day, especially with figures like Peak Hogsbreath in charge of our military.
To our enemies, F-A-F-O.
Please clap.
But Aliens, in 1982, before women could even be considered for combat zones, showed not one, but 2 women who are not only a member of the Marine Corps, but experienced and respected members of the Corps, and seen as equal, if not superior fighters than their male counterparts, especially in the case of Vasquez, who has probably one of the most badass self-sacrifices in all of horror.
You always were an asshole, Gorman.
When I go, I also want my last words to be telling an incompetent man that he is an asshole. Aliens not only understood the discussions of gender rights in the United States, but highlighted them and doubled down on them. And with that said, let's get to the big one. The real feminist legacy of the Alien franchise.
Good evening. In a landmark ruling, the Supreme Court today legalized abortions. The majority in cases from Texas and Georgia said that the decision to end a pregnancy during the first 3 months belongs to the woman and her doctor, not the government. Thus, the anti-abortion laws of 46 states were rendered unconstitutional.
At the time of the first Alien premiered, the subject of bodily autonomy weighed heavy on culture and society in the United States. The film was released not even 5 years after the landmark case of Roe v. Wade, granting the women and people with uteruses the right to bodily autonomy in all 50 states. To a point. You see, even with the right to an abortion, there are still certain limits on what conditions you had to meet in order to legally receive said right to an abortion. At the time of Alien's premiere, a survey was done revealing that while 80% of Americans believed that abortion should be legal at all, 89% of Americans believed that after 6 months gestation, abortion should never be allowed under any circumstances, including rape, incest, or endangering the mother's health.
In this instance, the Supreme Court has withdrawn protection for the human rights of unborn children, and it is teaching people that abortion is a rather innocuous procedure provided that there are proper legal safeguards. I think that the judgment of the court will do a great deal to tear down the respect previously accorded human life in our culture.
Yay! Women. Love it here. And while men are predominantly the ones who make laws surrounding abortion, their bodies are never the ones that need one. Until Alien. The fact that not only does Alien have forced impregnation as a plot point, but it's a plot point where a man is the one who is impregnated, that is a direct commentary on the discussions that were happening at the time about bodily autonomy of women and people with uteruses. Kane does not know that he has been impregnated until it is too late to do anything about it, reflecting a very common experience for people who have lived in heartbeat states where abortion was illegal past 6 weeks, which is largely before most people know that they are pregnant at all. That's just a 2-week late period, which if you're a stressed out person with a uterus, you would know happens all the time. I mean, there was a reason I used to worry about being the next Virgin Mary when I was 12. I mean, probably wouldn't be because I'm Jewish, but then again, so was Mary. And the very immersion of the xenomorph, the famous chest bursting scene that made so many of us afraid of pregnancy, look at the way Kane is positioned. It's like he's bearing down to go into labor. And I mean, if you look at the chest bursting, it's actually closer than the abdomen than it is to his chest. Just like pregnancy. I swear to God, this scene made me terrified to touch my sisters' and friends' bellies when they were pregnant because, like, I know it's a human baby, but what if it just pops out?
Hello, my baby. Hello, my honey.
The concept of forced impregnation is, again, doubled down on in Aliens, when potential forced impregnation is the villainous plot of Burke.
He figured that he could get an alien back through quarantine if one of us was impregnated. Whatever you call it.
Essentially making him a rapist. Yes, forced impregnation in every circumstance is sexual assault. Which is why I feel very vindicated every time I watch him bitch out and get eaten by a xenomorph. Alien 3 triples down on this, no pun intended, as it is revealed that Burke, unfortunately, was successful in his attempt and Ripley was forcefully impregnated during her hypersleep and is now gestating an embryo of a queen xenomorph.
Inside of you. It's not possible.
And rather than allow this violation of her body to continue, she jumps into the lava and sacrifices herself. She, a mother who has given birth, would rather die than give birth to a creature placed in her body against her will, just like so many real pregnant people have before her.
One girl, I remember the doctor saying there's nothing more we can do for her. Here's this beautiful young girl, and nobody there, and she's dying. She never woke up. I still see her face.
And before you say, it's different, the alien would have killed her if she had kept it. Yeah, that's a risk for literally all pregnancy.
We would see 15 to 20 people a day. They either went to the operating room or they went up to the septic abortion ward. and the septic abortion ward was full every day.
All pregnancy has the potential to be fatal, especially now. Alien Romulus was pretty polarizing amongst the Alien fanbase, with a lot of fans debating on the ethics of showing violence to women's bodies on screen. And as we've discussed in this video, unlike other horror films, the Alien franchise has typically avoided torturing women. Hitchcock? Unlike other films, in Alien Romulus, the first victim of the facehuggers, who is then thus forced to give birth via chest bursting, is a woman. And not only that, the worst of the violence done in this film is done to another female character, Kay, via her giving birth to a horrifying xenomorph human hybrid after she tries to save her pregnancy via experimental xenomorph DNA.
Get it away from me.
For many fans, that felt like a betrayal to what made Alien Alien. But to me, this is actually what makes Alien the brilliant reproductive rights commentary that it is. You see, just like Alien was made only a few short years after Roe vs. Wade was implemented, Alien Romulus was made only a few short years after it was overturned.
It's final. The Supreme Court today has struck down its own 1973 landmark ruling on Roe v. Wade,
meaning that reproductive rights are no longer constitutional, and in many cases, completely illegal.
States with trigger laws blocking access to abortions and criminalizing those who help someone seeking access will soon be in effect. Women of color will be hit hardest by this ruling, as well as people in other marginalized groups, whose rights are now also potentially at risk.
And as a result, women are dying from wanted pregnancies. Since the overturning of Roe v. Wade, maternal mortality rates in the United States has risen by 33%. And in states like Texas, with very restrictive abortion laws, women are 3 times more likely to die due to pregnancy-related issues.
The way the law is written, if you're a doctor in the state of Texas and a patient comes into the hospital experiencing a miscarriage, those doctors often have to wait until one of 2 things happens. Either the fetus no longer has a heartbeat and the doctor can document that, or their patient experiences some life-threatening condition like sepsis, and then they can intervene.
And in worst-case scenarios, like the case of Adriana Smith, women are being kept alive for months as incubators after being declared brain dead, all because she was pregnant at the time of having an aneurysm.
And I'm not saying that we would have chose to terminate her pregnancy. What I'm saying is we should have had a choice.
In the case of Alien Romulus, the character Kay begins the story with a wanted pregnancy.
I'm just happy this baby will get to see the sun.
But unfortunately, after Navarro is impregnated against her will, Kay's wanted pregnancy is put at risk until it kills her. Alien Romulus reminds us of the consequences of becoming pregnant in a post-Roe overturned world. Whether you want a baby or not, the lack of reproductive autonomy means that your life is always at risk. I understand the criticism that Alien Romulus got for using stereotypically gender-based violence, and I do agree that it tends to lean more towards the Hitchcockian torture women ways than I personally would have liked from this film. But still, I have to give this movie a lot of credit, the same way I have to give Prometheus a lot of credit. Are there ways that both of these movies failed? Yes, absolutely.
Get away from her. You bitch.
But both of these movies also understand on a fundamental level that Alien is not about girl-bossing feminism. Alien is and always has been a feminist franchise, not because Ripley is a badass final girl who says things like,
"Get away from her, you bitch!"
I'm a bitch, I'm a lover. Alien is feminist because it confronts us with the reasons why bodily autonomy matters for everyone. Because if I can't control what my uterus does, I will make sure that whatever comes out of it will kill you.
That was beautifully put. In fact, after hearing that, there's nothing more I wish to add. So, good night until next week.
Hi there! Like I said at the beginning of this, we are raising money today for Kayshana Music, who is an autism educator over on Instagram. Kayshana is a disabled content creator who makes content educating people about autism spectrum disorder, something that I actually used to do myself. And let me tell you, if you didn't know, that shit does not pay. Most people who are educating you about autism are doing it entirely for free, while having a disability that makes making money and having a job, a reliable job, extremely difficult. So one of the things I wanted to do with this platform is raise money for people who are seeking help through mutual aid funds. And I really want to donate proceeds of these videos to that, but I can't because I'm not monetized. So if you can't donate money to Kayshana, if you can, you should. But if you can't, what you can do is help me get to the monetization point so that I can start using these monies and these videos to put good into this world. I'm so sick of bad things happening and me not being able to do anything about it. So help me do something about it by making these videos go viral, talk about them, share them with your friends, annoy your conservative friends or your friends' conservatives' dads, because I don't know. There's so much power in annoying people, man. You really can get so much change through just annoying people. I mean, that's my life goal. Annoy people until they do what I want. Is it working? Have you subscribed and liked? Am I annoying enough yet? I could be more. I promise.